What happens when a routine power trip at an airport gate goes horribly wrong? An airline employee, feeling invincible behind her counter, decides to deny a first-class upgrade to a black man dripping with condescension and prejudice. She assumes he can't afford it, that he doesn't belong. She smirks as she sends him to the back of the plane. But she's made a catastrophic miscalculation. She doesn't know the man she just humiliated isn't just another passenger. He's the phantom billionaire who owns the entire airline. And he's about to teach her and his entire company a lesson in karma they will never forget. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a thick soup of anxiety-stale coffee and fleeting perfume. It was a cathedral of transient souls, and on this crisp Tuesday morning, Julian Vance was determined to be just another anonymous parishioner. He was dressed in a simple, well-worn, navy blue Henley dark gray jeans that had seen better days and a pair of comfortable Allbirds sneakers. On his wrist was a vintage Timex, its leather strap cracked with age, a gift from his late father, a mechanic who believed in function over flash. To the casual observer, Julian was just another man in his late 40s, perhaps a professor or a musician trying to get from New York to Los Angeles. His face etched with the faint lines of sleepless nights, and intense focus held a quiet warmth. His hair was cut short, flecked with distinguished gray at the temples. He carried no flashy luggage, just a simple, durable black backpack that contained a laptop, a paperback novel by Walter Mosley, and a notebook filled with scribbled schematics and business ideas. No one would ever guess he was Julian Vance, the reclusive founder and majority shareholder of the Vance Aviation Group VAG, a colossal private equity firm that had just 18 months prior acquired the financially struggling legacy carrier Etheria Airlines. The acquisition had been front-page news in the Wall Street Journal, but Vance himself remained a ghost. He despised the spotlight, never gave interviews, and used a photo from 2 decades ago for the rare instances a profile was required. He believed that to truly understand a machine, you had to get your hands dirty. You had to listen to its hum, feel its vibrations, and identify the friction points firsthand. Today, his machine was Etheria Flight 215, a Boeing 777. Service from JFK to LAX. He had booked a standard economy ticket under the unassuming name J. Smith. His executive team thought he was insane. "Julian, we have a corporate jet," his COO David Chen had protested over the phone the night before. "Failing that, let me book you in first. It's your airline. You can have the entire cabin if you want. And learn how well we treat the people we already know are important." Julian had countered, his voice calm and resolute. "I want to see the real Etheria, David. I want to feel what our average customer feels. The long lines, the cramped seats, the service when they don't know they're serving the man who signs the checks. That's where the truth is." His journey so far had been illuminating. The check-in kiosk had been glitchy. The TSA line was a masterclass in organized chaos. The coffee he bought at a terminal cafe was both lukewarm and extortionately priced. He made mental notes, tiny observations that would later become line items in a multi-million-dollar operational review. Now he stood near Gate B-24, watching the boarding process unfold. He saw the frantic energy of families trying to board together, the weary resignation of business travelers, and the anxious excitement of tourists. And he saw the gate agent. She was a woman in her mid-50s, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair that seemed immovable, and a name tag that read Karen. Her makeup was a severe mask. her lips pursed in a permanent state of disapproval. She wielded her authority like a weapon, her voice sharp and laced with impatience as she barked instructions into the microphone. Julian had an upgrade voucher, a standard perk he had applied to his J. Smith booking through the public app to test the system. His app showed first class was only 70% full, with at least 5 empty seats. He had deliberately waited until the final boarding call for his group, wanting to see how last-minute requests were handled. As the last few passengers in Zone 4 shuffled forward, Julian approached the podium. "Excuse me," he said, offering a polite, unassuming smile. "Hi, my name is J. Smith. I believe I was on the wait list for a first-class upgrade. My app says there are still a few seats available." Karen didn't look at his phone. She barely looked at him. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan from his simple sneakers to his plain Henley to his black skin, and a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk touched her lips. It was the kind of look Julian had seen 1,000 times in his life, in boardrooms, on street corners, in restaurants. It was the look of instant calculation and dismissal. "The upgrade list is closed," she said flatly, her tone suggesting he was an idiot for even asking. She turned her attention back to her computer screen, tapping a key with a manicured nail. "Oh," Julian said, maintaining his calm. "That's odd. The system confirmed my request, and it still shows availability. Could you possibly just double-check? I'd be happy to pay any fare difference, of course." This time she did look at him. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a low, condescending register, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "Sir," she began, drawing the word out. "People on the upgrade list have already been processed. It's for our Platinum and Diamond Medallion members. The app can be glitchy. There are no more upgrades." The subtext was as clear as the polished terminal floor. People like you don't belong up there. Julian felt a familiar cold knot tighten in his stomach. It wasn't rage. It was a profound, weary disappointment. This was the friction he'd been looking for. It wasn't a glitch in the app. It was a virus in the culture. "I see," he said softly. "Well, thank you for your time." He turned to walk toward the jet bridge, but Karen wasn't finished. She called after him, her voice now loud enough for the remaining passengers and the other airline staff to hear. "Sir, you'll be in seat 38E. That's a middle seat in the back. I'd hurry up if I were you. You're holding up the flight." The humiliation was public, deliberate, and designed to put him in his place. A few people glanced over their expressions, a mixture of pity and discomfort. Julian simply nodded, his face an unreadable mask, and walked down the jet bridge. As he did, a man in an expensive Zegna suit, who had been standing nearby, pretending to be on his phone, caught his eye. The man gave Julian a small, sympathetic nod. He had seen the whole thing. Julian didn't know it yet, but that man was Marcus Thorne, a senior partner at one of New York's most ruthless corporate law firms, and he was sitting in seat 2A. And he had recorded the entire exchange on his phone. The first piece of a puzzle Julian wasn't even aware he was building had just fallen into place. The journey down the narrow aisle of the Boeing 777 felt like a walk of shame. Julian's backpack bumped against elbows and headrests as he made his way toward the rear of the aircraft. The plush, spacious pods of first class, with their lie-flat seats and complimentary champagne, gave way to the increasingly cramped and utilitarian rows of economy. He finally reached row 38, squeezed past a young man engrossed in a video game, and a woman who had already kicked off her shoes and folded his 6'2" frame into the dreaded middle seat. The seat was a marvel of minimalist engineering designed to provide the bare minimum of comfort required to prevent a full-blown passenger revolt. His knees were pressed firmly against the seat in front of him. The air was stale. A baby started crying a few rows back. This, Julian thought with a grim sense of irony, was the unvarnished reality for 95% of his customers. He wasn't angry at the discomfort. He had endured far worse in his life, sleeping on floors while launching his first startup, living off ramen noodles, working 20-hour days fueled by sheer will. What truly bothered him was the why. He was in this seat not because of policy, but because of prejudice. Karen, the gate agent, had made a judgment call based on his appearance. She hadn't checked her system. She hadn't considered the possibility that he was a paying customer with a valid request. She had simply looked at him and decided he was unworthy. That decision, born of a casual, everyday bigotry, was a direct reflection on UCtEU Airlines. On his airline. It suggested a deep-seated cultural rot, a cancer that no amount of marketing or fleet upgrades could hide. An airline wasn't just a collection of planes and routes. It was a service, an experience delivered by people. And one person, one Karen, could undo millions of dollars in brand building with a single condescending smirk. The plane taxied, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, a smooth, professional baritone, announcing a flight time of 5 hours and 42 minutes. As they ascended, Julian closed his eyes not to rest, but to think. He wasn't plotting revenge. Julian Vance didn't do revenge. He did systemic analysis and decisive strategic action. Revenge was emotional and fleeting. Restructuring was permanent. About an hour into the flight, the cabin crew began the beverage service. A young flight attendant with a warm, genuine smile and a name tag that read Sarah reached his row. "Anything to drink for you folks?" she asked, her eyes making direct contact with each passenger. "Just a water, please," Julian said. When she handed it to him, their fingers brushed, and she noticed the old cracked Timex on his wrist. "That's a beautiful watch," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "My grandfather had one just like it. Said it was the most honest watch a man could own." Julian was taken aback. In his world, people noticed Patek Philippe's and Audemar's Piguets. His simple Timex was usually invisible. "Thank you," he replied, a genuine smile finally gracing his face. "It was my father's. He was a mechanic. Believed in things that worked, not things that shone." "A man after my own heart," Sarah said with a wink, before moving on to the next row. It was a small moment, a fleeting human connection, but it stood in stark contrast to his experience at the gate. Here was an employee who saw a person, not a stereotype. She was efficient, kind, and observant. He discreetly took out his small notebook and jotted down her name, the date, and the flight number, followed by the words, "Exemplary service, natural leader, follow up." For the rest of the flight, Julian observed. He watched Sarah handle a passenger with a severe nut allergy, with compassion and professionalism, ensuring his entire seating area was wiped down and the passengers around him were notified. He watched her patiently explain the in-flight entertainment system to an elderly passenger who was struggling with the technology. He also noted the other flight attendant in their section, a man who seemed bored and went through the motions with robotic indifference. He noted the state of the lavatory clean, but with a broken latch on the cabinet. He noted the speed of the Wi-Fi abysmal. Every observation was a data point. The broken latch was a maintenance issue. The slow Wi-Fi was an IT and vendor management problem. The indifferent flight attendant was a training and morale issue. And Karen was a human resources and corporate culture crisis. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, the man in the Zegna suit from the gate, Marcus Thorne, in seat 2A, finished his complimentary Merlot, declined a hot towel, and sent a quick encrypted email to his associate. The subject line was Potential Corporate Governance Matter, UCtEU Airlines. In the body, he detailed the incident he had witnessed at JFK Gate B-24. He described the gate agent's tone, her dismissive language, and the race of the passenger. He attached the short video he had discreetly filmed. "This kind of behavior is a lawsuit waiting to happen," he wrote. "It's a clear indicator of systemic issues. Keep an eye on UCtEU's stock. If this is how they treat their customers, their internal controls must be a mess. Might be an opportunity for an activist investor." He had no idea that the man at the center of his observation, now unfolding his cramped limbs in seat 38E, was not a future plaintiff or an activist investor. He was the owner. And the changes he was about to implement would be more swift and more severe than any lawsuit could ever hope to achieve. The gears were turning not just in the landing gear of the 777, but in the mind of the man who was about to completely overhaul his multi-billion-dollar company from the inside out. The moment the plane docked at the gate at LAX, the familiar scramble began. Seatbelt signs pinged off, and a wave of passengers surged into the aisle, eager to escape the metal tube. Julian, however, remained seated. He had no desire to join the frantic shuffle. He preferred to be the last one off, a habit that gave him time to observe the cleanup process and chat with the flight crew if the opportunity arose. He waited patiently, responding with a quiet, "No problem," to the apologies of his rowmates as they squeezed past him. Finally, the aisle was clear, leaving only Julian, the flight attendants, tidying the cabin and the last few stragglers. He stood up, stretched his stiff back, and grabbed his backpack from the overhead bin. As he walked toward the front of the plane, he saw Sarah near the galley gathering discarded blankets. He paused. "Excuse me, Sarah." She looked up, her tired face breaking into that same warm smile. "Yes, sir. Did you leave something behind?" "No, nothing like that," Julian said. "I just wanted to thank you. Your professionalism and kindness today were exceptional. It didn't go unnoticed." Sarah blushed slightly. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you. We try our best." "You do more than that," Julian said, his gaze direct and sincere. "You represent the best of what this airline should be. Thank you again." He left her looking surprised and pleased, and proceeded to the cockpit where the door was open. The captain, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, was finishing up her post-flight checks. Her name tag read E. Rostova. Captain Eva Rostova was a legend within UCtEU. A former Air Force pilot, she had been one of the first female captains for the airline and was known for her calm demeanor and impeccable safety record. She was no nonsense, and she commanded respect. "Captain Rostova," Julian said from the doorway. She looked up from her console, her expression professional but questioning. "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Julian Vance," he said simply, his voice low and devoid of any arrogance. He didn't use his fake name this time. He stepped just inside the cockpit. "I was a passenger on your flight today in seat 38E. The name didn't register immediately. Why would it? The owner's name was known in the boardroom, not on the flight deck. "Okay, Mr. Vance, is there an issue I can assist you with?" she asked, her tone implying he should be directing his issue to customer service. "There is actually," Julian continued, his calm unwavering. "I'm the owner of Vance Aviation Group, which means I own this airline, and I have a few concerns about my customer experience today." The change in Captain Rostova's demeanor was instantaneous and profound. It wasn't panic, but a sudden razor-sharp focus. Her pilot's mind, trained to assess critical situations in seconds, went into overdrive. She processed his face, his calm authority, and the sheer improbability of the statement. She had seen the memo about the VG acquisition, of course, and knew the name of the mysterious new owner. She just never expected to meet him in her cockpit after he'd flown in a middle seat. Her professionalism clicked into a higher gear. "I see," she said, her voice now tight with controlled seriousness. She stood up, extending a hand. "Captain Eva Rostova. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Vance. Please excuse the informal setting." "The pleasure is all mine, Captain. Your landing was superb," Julian said, shaking her hand firmly. "The issue wasn't with your crew. In fact, one of your flight attendants, Sarah, was a credit to this company. The issue began before I even boarded the plane." He then recounted in a calm, factual, and unemotional tone the entire exchange with the gate agent Karen Miller at JFK. He didn't embellish or editorialize. He simply stated what was said, the tone that was used, and the public nature of the refusal and subsequent humiliation. As he spoke, Captain Rostova's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. She was a professional to her core, and she understood that the chain of command and customer experience began long before the plane left the ground. An agent at the gate represented the entire airline just as much as she did in the cockpit. Karen's behavior was an insult to the uniform, a risk to the brand, and a direct violation of every principle of service Eva held dear. "Mr. Vance," she said when he finished, her voice dangerously quiet. "That is unacceptable. It is inexcusable. On behalf of Etheria, I offer you my most profound apology. That is not who we are, and that is not what we stand for." "I appreciate that, Captain," Julian replied. "But my concern is that for some of your employees it is who they are. And I need to know why. And I need to fix it. My COO, David Chen, will be in touch with you. I would appreciate your full and frank statement on the matter and your professional assessment of your crew." "You will have it within the hour," she promised, "along with the names of the entire cabin crew for commendation or review. The flight manifest will also confirm the empty seats in first class." "Thank you, Captain," Julian said with a nod. "I have a feeling you and I will be talking again soon." He turned and left the aircraft, stepping into the bustling LAX terminal. He pulled out his phone, bypassing the hundreds of emails and messages, and sent a single encrypted text to David Chen. It read, "Landed. We have a serious problem. Code red. JFK Gate B-24 Flight 215. Agent name Karen Miller. Get me everything. CCTV HR file passenger witness list. I want a full operational review of JFK ground staff. Contact Captain Eva Rostova for her report. Something is rotten in our company, David, and we're going to cut it out." David Chen, sitting in his sleek Manhattan office 3,000 miles away, read the text and felt a chill run down his spine. Code Red was a designation Julian had used only twice before. Once when a hostile takeover was imminent, and once when they discovered massive fraud in a subsidiary. It meant Julian wasn't just angry, he was on the warpath. He immediately began to mobilize his team. The corporate machine of Vance Aviation Group, a silent, powerful beast, had just been awakened, and its full undivided attention was now focused on a single gate agent in New York. While Karen Miller was finishing her shift at JFK, feeling smugly satisfied with a day of enforcing rules and maintaining order, a digital storm was gathering around her. She clocked out complaining to a colleague about the entitled passengers she had to deal with, completely oblivious that her entire professional life was being systematically dissected 3,000 miles away. At the VAG headquarters on Park Avenue, David Chen was a maestro conducting a symphony of corporate investigation. He was a quiet, ruthlessly efficient man in his early 50s, with a mind like a steel trap. He had been with Julian from the beginning, the logistical yin to Julian's visionary yang. When Julian gave a code red order, David executed it with the precision of a military strike. His first call was to Etherea's head of corporate security. Arthur David Chen here. I need an immediate and discreet pull of all CCTV footage from JFK Terminal 4 Gate B24. Timestamps from 10:00 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Eastern today. I want every angle on the podium and the boarding area. Encrypt it and send it directly to my personal server. This is a Vance-level directive. Absolute discretion. His second call was to the head of human resources. Maria, I need the complete file on an employee. Gate agent Karen Miller based at JFK. I want everything hiring date performance reviews, commendations, and most importantly, any and all passenger complaints or disciplinary actions. I don't want a summary. I want the raw file scanned and sent to my secure email within the next 30 minutes. This is a matter of extreme urgency. His third action was an email to the Chief Technology Officer. Frank, I need a complete data log for Flight 215 JFK to LAX today's date. Specifically, I want the passenger manifest, the final seating chart, the complete upgrade wait list, and the PNR passenger name record for one J. Smith. I need to see every transaction and note associated with that booking and the status of the first-class cabin at the time of boarding. Confirm for me precisely how many seats were empty. Within minutes, the data started to flow in. The pieces of the puzzle began to assemble themselves on the massive screen in David's office. First, the HR file arrived. Karen Miller had been with Etherea for 22 years. Her performance reviews were a mixed bag. For years, they were average, with notes about her being efficient but curt. But over the last 5 years, a pattern had emerged. A folder thick with customer complaints appeared. The allegations were strikingly similar: rudeness, inflexibility, a condescending attitude. David's eyes narrowed as he noticed a disturbing trend. A disproportionate number of the complaints were filed by passengers who were people of color. They all told similar stories of being dismissed, talked down to, and treated with suspicion. Each complaint had been investigated by a local JFK manager and closed with a note like, "Employee counseled," or "No action required." It was a pattern of behavior that had been ignored, a problem that had been allowed to fester. Next, the flight data came through. It confirmed everything Julian had suspected. At the time of boarding, there were 6 empty seats in first class. Julian's J. Smith booking was number 1 on the upgrade list for his fare class. The system showed his voucher was valid. A note in the PNR automatically generated even showed he had checked in via the app and confirmed his interest in the upgrade. According to Etherea's own rules, he should have been given the seat. Karen hadn't just been rude. She had actively defied company policy. Then, the CCTV footage arrived. David dimmed his office lights and played the main angle on his screen. There was Julian approaching the podium. The audio was faint, but the body language was damningly clear. He saw Julian's polite posture, the friendly smile. And he saw Karen's reaction, the dismissive wave of her hand. The lean in her face contorted into a mask of condescension. He saw her final loud call to him as he walked away, a clear act of public shaming. He zoomed in and saw the other passengers staring. He saw a man in a suit, Marcus Thorne, discreetly pointing his phone. David paused the video. He felt a cold anger settle in his gut. This wasn't just poor customer service. This was a deep, systemic failure. Karen was the symptom, but the disease was the management culture at JFK that had ignored years of complaints and allowed this behavior to become normalized. Just as he was processing this, an email landed in his inbox with a high importance flag. It was from an external address sent by a Marcus Thorne of the law firm Thorne, Weber & Locke. David's eyes widened. This was one of the most powerful corporate law firms in the country. The email was concise and professional. Dear Mr. Chen, my name is Marcus Thorne. I was a passenger in first class on Etheria Flight 215 today. I am writing to you as both a concerned customer and a private citizen who witnessed a deeply disturbing interaction at gate B24 prior to boarding. An employee of yours, Ms. Karen Miller, engaged in what I can only describe as discriminatory and unprofessional conduct towards another passenger. I have attached my official statement and a short video clip of the incident. I trust that the leadership of Etheria and Vance Aviation Group will take this matter with the seriousness it deserves. Sincerely, Marcus Thorne. David opened the attachment. The video was crystal clear. The audio captured by the phone's microphone was much better than the CCTV. Karen's words were unmistakable. Sir, people on the upgrade list have already been processed. It's for our Platinum and Diamond Medallion members. There are no more upgrades. And then the final parting shot. Sir, you'll be in seat 38E. That's a middle seat in the back. I'd hurry up if I were you. You're holding up the flight. David leaned back in his chair, the evidence overwhelming. He now had the HR file showing a pattern of behavior. He had the flight data proving a policy violation. He had the CCTV footage showing the interaction. And now he had a high-quality video and a witness statement from one of the most powerful lawyers in New York. This was no longer just about firing an employee. This was about demonstrating in the most decisive way possible that the old Etheria was dead. The era of mediocrity and ignored complaints was over. Julian Vance's Etheria was going to be built on a foundation of respect, and they would make an example of anyone who stood in the way. He picked up his phone and dialed Etheria's head of PR. Janet, clear the decks. We're going to have a major internal announcement tomorrow, possibly followed by a public one. I'm about to send you a file. Get ready. Next, he called the regional manager for JFK. Elizabeth, I'll be in your office at 9:00 a.m. sharp tomorrow. You will have Karen Miller there. Do not tell her why. Just tell her it's a mandatory operational meeting. And Elizabeth, be prepared for a very difficult day. The hunt was over. The judgment was coming. The next morning, Karen Miller arrived for her 9:00 a.m. meeting feeling irritated. Being called in on her day off for an operational meeting was an inconvenience. She walked into the JFK Airport administrative offices with her usual air of self-importance, assuming it was probably some new, pointless training seminar. She entered the regional manager's office and was surprised to find not just her direct boss, Elizabeth, but a grim-faced man in a perfectly tailored suit she didn't recognize visible on a large video conference screen on the wall. Elizabeth, a normally composed woman, looked pale and stressed. Karen, thank you for coming in, Elizabeth said, her voice strained. This is David Chen, the Chief Operating Officer of Vance Aviation Group. Karen's confidence wavered for a fraction of a second. The COO of the parent company. Why was he here? She quickly regained her composure. She'd been with the airline for over 2 decades. She was untouchable. Mr. Chen, she said with a nod, taking a seat. What's this all about? David Chen's face on the screen was impassive, his eyes like chips of ice. Ms. Miller, we are here to discuss an incident that occurred yesterday at Gate B24 prior to the boarding of Flight 215 to Los Angeles. Karen's mind instantly flashed to the black man from the day before. Her defensiveness flared immediately. Oh, for heaven's sake, she scoffed. Is this about that man who was demanding an upgrade? He became very insistent and was holding up the boarding process. I handled it by the book." David Chen's expression didn't change. "Let's review the book, shall we, Ms. Miller? According to our data flight, 215 departed with 6 empty seats in first class. Is that correct?" "Well, I don't know the exact number, but those are often held for last-minute full-fare bookings or crew rest requirements," she retorted, reciting a line she'd used 100 times. "They were not," David stated flatly. "They were open available seats. The passenger in question, booked under the name J. Smith, was number 1 on the upgrade list. According to Section 4, Paragraph 7 of UCtEU's service manual, he should have been assigned one of those seats. Can you explain why you defied company policy?" Karen shifted in her seat. "The list was closed. The system can be glitchy. My priority is an on-time departure. He was being disruptive." "Disruptive?" David's voice was dangerously soft. "We have the CCTV footage, Ms. Miller. It shows the passenger approaching you calmly and politely. It shows you adopting a hostile and condescending tone. It shows you raising your voice to publicly shame him about his seat assignment." "The footage does not tell the whole story." "He had an attitude," she insisted, her voice rising. "Perhaps another recording will," David said. "Elizabeth, please play the file I sent you." Elizabeth, looking miserable, clicked a mouse on her desk. The crystal-clear audio from Marcus Thorne's phone filled the silent room. Karen's own voice, dripping with disdain, echoed back at her. "Sir, people on the upgrade list have already been processed. There are no more upgrades. Sir, you'll be in seat 38E. That's a middle seat in the back." Hearing her own words played back in that sterile, quiet office was like a physical blow. The color drained from her face. There was no ambiguity, no room for denial. It was all there. "The man you saw in that video," David continued, his voice cutting through the silence, "was Marcus Thorne, a senior partner at Thorne, Weber & Locke, one of the most influential law firms in the country. He was so appalled by your behavior that he sent us a formal complaint, and this video. He identified your actions as a clear example of discriminatory conduct and a massive liability for this company." Karen opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "But Mr. Thorne, for all his influence, is not the most important person in this story." David went on, his gaze intensifying. "Let's talk about the passenger you denied. The man you humiliated. The man you sent to a middle seat in the back of the plane. You made a judgment about him, didn't you, Ms. Miller? You looked at his simple clothes, his old watch, and the color of his skin, and you decided he didn't belong in first class." Karen just stared, speechless. "The man in seat 38E was named Julian Vance," David said, letting the name hang in the air for a moment. "He is the founder and owner of Vance Aviation Group. He is my boss. And Ms. Miller, he is the man who owns this airline. He was flying incognito to assess the state of his company. And you, Ms. Miller, you provided him with the most thorough and damning assessment he could have ever asked for." The world seemed to tilt under Karen's chair. A wave of nausea washed over her. It felt like a nightmare. The man she'd sneered at, the owner, it wasn't possible. It was a joke. But the look on David Chen's face was anything but a joke. "Your actions were not just rude, Ms. Miller." David's voice was now like thunder. "They were a betrayal of every value we intend to build this company on. You not only violated policy and exposed this company to legal action, but you also revealed a deep-seated prejudice that we will not tolerate. Your employment with UCtEU Airlines is terminated effective immediately." "You can't do that," she finally stammered, panic overriding her shock. "I have a union. I've been here for 22 years. "We've already spoken to your union representative," David said coldly. "We showed them the video and the file of your past complaints. They have informed us they will not be contesting the termination. You violated the company's code of conduct and clauses regarding gross misconduct and bringing the company into public disrepute. Elizabeth has your final paperwork. Security will escort you to your locker to collect your personal belongings, and then they will escort you off the premises. You are not to set foot on Aetheria property ever again. It was over. 22 years of service erased in 10 minutes. Her sense of security, her seniority, her power, all gone. As she sat there, utterly broken, David Chen delivered the final devastating blow. One more thing, Ms. Miller. Mr. Vance believes in accountability, but he also believes in rewarding excellence. The flight attendant on Flight 215, who showed him what true Aetheria service looks like, a young woman named Sarah, is being given a field promotion to purser, a commendation for exceptional service, and a significant stock bonus. We are building a culture that rewards empathy and professionalism. Your behavior yesterday has become the catalyst for that change. You will be remembered not as an employee, but as a lesson. The meeting is over. The video screen went black. Karen Miller was left in the silent room, the architect of her own spectacular downfall. The hard karma she had so casually dealt out her entire career had finally come back to her, not as a gentle tap, but as an avalanche. The termination of Karen Miller was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. For Julian Vance, firing one problematic employee was like pulling a single weed from an overgrown garden. It was a necessary first step, but it did nothing to address the poor soil and lack of sunlight that allowed the weed to flourish in the first place. The real work was just beginning. Within 24 hours, an internal memo personally signed by Julian Vance was sent to every single one of Aetheria's 80,000 employees worldwide. It was titled, The Aetheria Standard. The memo candidly, and without naming names, described an incident where a senior executive flying incognito was subjected to unacceptable and discriminatory treatment by a member of our ground staff. It detailed how policy was ignored and a customer was judged based on their appearance. Let me be unequivocally clear, the memo read. Aetheria Airlines is not defined by our planes or our routes. We are defined by our actions. Every single employee from the boardroom to the baggage handlers is an ambassador for this company. Prejudice in any form is a poison we will not tolerate. Arrogance is a disease we will eradicate. The belief that your authority comes from your uniform and not from the respect you earn from our customers and your colleagues is a fallacy that will no longer have a home here. The memo announced the immediate launch of the Vance Initiative, a sweeping top-to-bottom overhaul of customer service training and corporate culture. The program would be mandatory for all employees from the C-suite down. It would be led by a newly hired team of diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI experts and would use real-life case studies, including a redacted, anonymized version of Julian's own experience, to drive the lessons home. The news of Karen Miller's firing and the reason for it spread like wildfire through the company grapevine. The story became an instant legend, a cautionary tale whispered in break rooms from Newark to San Francisco. The details were embellished, of course, but the core message was clear: the new boss is watching, and he doesn't miss a thing. The impact on employee morale was seismic. For many, it was a breath of fresh air. Long-suffering employees who had tried to do their best felt validated and seen. The good apples like Sarah suddenly felt empowered. Sarah herself was flown to New York, where she met with Julian and David. She was terrified at first, but Julian quickly put her at ease. "Sarah," he said, shaking her hand warmly, "on one of the worst days I've had as a customer, you were the single bright spot. You didn't know who I was, and you treated me with dignity and kindness. That's not something you can teach. That's character. I want you to help us build our new training program. I want you to share your perspective with our new recruits. We need more people like you." Sarah, overwhelmed and emotional, accepted. Her promotion was real, and her insights became a cornerstone of the new Etheria service model. But for others, the memo was a threat. Employees who had coasted for years on seniority, who had treated customers with disdain, suddenly felt a chill of fear. The old way of doing things was over. The union, which had initially been prepared to fight for Karen, had backed down immediately upon seeing the evidence. They knew it was an unwinnable case, and fighting it would make them look like they condoned her behavior. They quietly advised their members to take the new training seriously. Meanwhile, Karen Miller's life imploded. She was not just fired, she was radioactive. The story, leaked by an Etheria employee to an aviation blogger, went viral. It was picked up by major news outlets, becoming a national story about corporate accountability and karma. Though the airline never officially named her amateur internet sleuths, quickly pieced together the details from flight schedules and employee forums. Her name, Karen Miller, became synonymous with racist customer service. She tried to find work at other airlines, but the moment hiring managers Googled her name, the interviews would end. The industry was small. No one wanted to hire the woman who had humiliated the billionaire owner of her own company. She was forced to sell her house, downsize her life, and take a job at a call center. A faceless voice dealing with angry customers for a fraction of her former salary. The authority she had craved and abused was gone forever, replaced by the crushing anonymity of a headset and a script. The changes at Etheria were swift and visible. Airport lobbies got new, clearer signage. The app was streamlined. A 24/7 customer concerns hotline was established, reporting directly to David Chen's office. Julian invested hundreds of millions into refurbishing the planes, with a special focus on making economy class more bearable, better seats, faster Wi-Fi, and improved entertainment systems. He argued that the true measure of the brand wasn't how it treated its first-class passengers, but how it treated everyone else. The story had another unintended positive consequence. Marcus Thorne, the lawyer in 2A, was so impressed with the company's decisive action that he rerouted his firm's multi-million-dollar corporate travel account to Etheria. He even wrote a piece for the Harvard Business Review, using the incident as a case study in effective corporate governance and brand rehabilitation. The ripple effect of that one confrontation at Gate B24 had become a tidal wave of change, washing away the old complacent culture of Etheria and leaving behind a company that was leaner, smarter, and for the first time in a long time, genuinely focused on its people, both the ones who worked there and the ones who paid to fly. 1 year later, Julian Vance stood in the observation deck at the new Etheria Airlines terminal at LAX, a project he had personally fast-tracked. Below him, the tarmac was a meticulously choreographed ballet of his aircraft. The company's new livery, a simple, elegant silver stripe against a deep blue tail, gleamed under the California sun. Etheria was a different airline. Customer satisfaction scores had skyrocketed. It was winning awards for service, and its stock, which VAG had taken public 6 months prior, was one of the top performers on the NYSE. The Vance Initiative was now simply known as the Etheria Standard, a benchmark for the entire industry. He was no longer an anonymous passenger. His face was now known, though he still preferred to travel without fanfare. He was on his way to Seattle to meet with Boeing engineers about a new cabin design, as he watched a young family was struggling with their luggage near the gate. A gate agent, A young man with a bright, welcoming smile left his podium without being asked, went over to the family and helped them organize their bags, making the children laugh in the process. It was a small thing, but it was everything. It was the culture he had fought to build. David Chen came to stand beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Looks good, doesn't it?" David said, handing a cup to Julian. "It's a start," Julian replied, his eyes still on the scene below. "We're not perfect. We'll never be perfect. But we're better. Every day we have to decide to be better." "The JFK team sent their quarterly report," David said. "Complaint numbers are down 90% year over year. Commendations are up 400%. Elizabeth is a new woman. Says it's the best work environment she's seen in 30 years. Julian nodded, a faint smile on his lips. He never took pleasure in Karen Miller's downfall. To him, her fate was a sad but necessary consequence of a broken system. His goal was never to ruin one life, but to improve tens of thousands of them. "And what about Sarah?" Julian asked. "Sarah's a star," David beamed. "She's now the head of in-flight service training for the entire West Coast. The Sarah Standard is what they call it. Treat every passenger like they own the airline." Julian chuckled softly at the irony. "Good. That's good." His phone buzzed. It was a news alert. A small regional airline in the Midwest had been hit with a major discrimination lawsuit. A video had surfaced of a gate agent being rude to a minority passenger. The airline's stock was plummeting. The CEO had issued a weak, corporate-sounding apology. Julian looked at the headline, then back at his own thriving operation. He thought of the man in the worn Henley and old Timex watch, standing in a terminal, being told he didn't belong. The incident had cost Karen Miller her job and her reputation, but it had given Etheria Airlines something it had lost long ago: its soul. He took a sip of his coffee. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt his airline was finally flying in the right direction. The machine was running smoothly, not just because the engines were sound, but because the people at its heart were finally being taught to value the one thing that mattered most: the simple, profound, and non-negotiable act of human decency. That single moment of prejudice at Gate B24 set off a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. It wasn't just about one racist employee getting her karma. It was about how one person's quiet integrity can force a multi-billion-dollar corporation to rediscover its humanity. Julian Vance's story is a powerful reminder that true leadership isn't about sitting in a corner office. It's about walking in the shoes of your customers and having the courage to fix the problems you find, no matter how uncomfortable. It shows that the best companies aren't built on policies, but on people, and that a culture of respect is the most valuable asset you can own. If this story resonated with you, and you believe in accountability and the power of doing the right thing, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more true-life stories of justice and karma. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were Julian Vance?